Home prices in your city may be falling, but that doesn't mean your life is getting cheaper. Because while sellers slash asking prices, insurance premiums, property taxes, and borrowing costs are quietly exploding. That's the paradox few people are prepared for. The sticker price drops, but the cost of owning keeps rising. Buyers hesitate, sellers lose leverage, listings sit longer, and what once looked like equity slowly turns into a liability. So here's the question no one wants to answer. Which U.S. cities are becoming more dangerous to own a home in 2026, precisely because prices are falling? By 2026, the U.S. housing market is no longer driven by optimism. It is driven by friction. For nearly a decade, low interest rates, easy credit, and the belief that prices only go up pushed buyers, investors, and builders into the same direction. Demand surged. Construction followed. Migration accelerated. And for a while, the math worked. That math is now breaking. The first crack came from interest rates. As borrowing costs reversed sharply, monthly payments jumped, even when home prices started to soften. A house that looked affordable on paper suddenly became unreachable once financing was applied. This single shift froze buyers in place. At the same time, migration patterns quietly reversed. Cities that exploded during the pandemic, fueled by remote work and lifestyle hype, are no longer absorbing new arrivals at the same pace. Some are seeing net outflows, others are simply stalling. But supply, already approved and under construction, kept coming online anyway. That mismatch created a familiar but dangerous condition: overbuilding. Even from Texas to the Carolinas to parts of the Mountain West, tens of thousands of homes were added based on demand assumptions that no longer exist. Builders are now competing with resale homes, investors are competing with desperate sellers, and buyers, aware of their leverage, are waiting. Then came the second pressure wave: ownership costs. Insurance premiums have surged, especially in climate-exposed states. Property taxes reset higher after boom-era assessments. HOA fees climbed as maintenance, labor, and financing costs rose. In many cities, utilities, from water to electricity, now reflect long-term infrastructure strain rather than short-term usage. The result is a market where prices can fall, but total cost does not. This cycle is different from past corrections. It is not just about valuation, it is about viability. Homes are harder to sell, harder to finance, and harder to hold. And that pressure is unevenly distributed, concentrated in cities that expanded fastest, believed the hype longest, and built the most. In this video, we'll walk through 7 U.S. cities where that pressure is no longer theoretical, where sellers are losing control, where buyers are rewriting the rules, and where the real cost of the last housing boom is finally becoming visible. If you want to understand where the risks are and why they matter, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Because these are not abstract trends. They are real stories unfolding right now. 1. Tampa, Florida. For years, Tampa was marketed as the smart Florida alternative. Not as flashy as Miami, not as saturated as Naples, just affordable enough, close enough to the coast, and growing fast enough to feel safe. That narrative is now under stress. During the migration boom, Tampa absorbed waves of remote workers, retirees, and investors chasing tax advantages and sunshine. Prices surged quickly. By the peak, bidding wars were common, and buyers waived inspections to lock in homes before someone else did. Today, the leverage has shifted. Price cuts are spreading across listings, especially in suburban pockets that expanded fastest. Homes that once sold in days now sit for weeks, sometimes months. But the real pressure isn't just coming from falling prices. It's coming from ownership costs that refuse to come down. Insurance is the center of gravity. Premiums in many Tampa area zip codes have doubled or tripled in just a few years. Yes, some homeowners are being forced onto last resort insurers with high deductibles and limited coverage. Others are paying thousands more annually just to stay compliant with their mortgage terms. At the same time, Property taxes reset upward after boom-era valuations. HOA fees are climbing as associations struggle with higher maintenance costs, rising insurance for shared structures and deferred repairs. Even utilities, especially water, are reflecting long-term infrastructure strain rather than simple usage. The result is a trap. Sellers can't get the prices they want, buyers can't make the monthly numbers work, and homeowners who bought near the top are discovering that selling doesn't free them, it locks in losses. Some are trying to rent instead. But increased inventory and slowing demand are pushing rents down just as carrying costs rise. Cash flow is tightening. Patience is thinning. Tampa isn't collapsing overnight, but the illusion of effortless Florida living is fading. And the question now is simple. If prices fall further, who will be able and willing to take over these homes at today's true cost of ownership? 2. Austin, Texas. Austin was once framed as the future of American growth, a tech hub without coastal prices. A city where talent, capital, and culture converged, and where housing demand seemed limitless. That belief drove one of the fastest expansions in the country. Builders raced to deliver thousands of new units. Investors piled in, confident that population growth would absorb everything. Condos rose downtown. Subdivisions stretched outward. And for a moment, supply barely mattered. Buyers were lining up anyway. That moment has passed. As interest rates reset higher, Austin's affordability advantage evaporated almost overnight. Monthly payments jumped far faster than incomes. Buyers stepped back. Inventory climbed, and the market quietly flipped. Price reductions are now common across both single-family homes and condos. New developments are offering concessions, closing cost credits, rate buydowns, even furnished units to keep deals alive. What used to sell in days now sits, waiting for the next cut. The core issue is structural. Austin built for continued acceleration, not for pause. When demand slowed, the volume of new supply had nowhere to go. Investors who counted on appreciation are discovering that rents no longer cover financing. And owners who stretch to buy near the peak are facing a shrinking exit window. Downtown condos are feeling this first. Vacancy pockets are widening. Sellers are competing not just on price, but on incentives. And buyers, aware of their leverage, are refusing to rush. The pressure extends outward as well. Suburban markets that once absorbed overflow demand are now saturated with listings. Commutes feel longer. Price expectations are resetting. Austin isn't failing, but it is unwinding. And the question isn't whether prices can fall further. It's whether the city's housing market can stabilize after building for a version of growth that no longer exists. 3. Denver, Colorado. Denver built its housing boom on a powerful promise: career opportunity paired with lifestyle freedom. For years, that promise worked. Tech workers, engineers, outdoor enthusiasts, and young families flowed in, drawn by high wages, abundant sunshine, and instant access to the Rockies. Prices climbed steadily, competition intensified, and buyers accepted the math because the lifestyle felt worth it. That math is now under strain. By 2026, Denver has run headfirst into an affordability wall. Even as prices begin to soften in certain pockets, monthly payments remain elevated due to financing costs. For many households, the gap between what they earn and what it takes to own has become impossible to ignore. Condos and urban units are feeling the pressure first. Downtown and near downtown areas have seen listings linger longer, especially where HOA fees add hundreds of dollars to already high monthly obligations. Sellers are discovering that price cuts alone don't fix the problem when total ownership costs stay heavy. Single-family homes are not immune. Suburban buyers are more cautious. Move-up buyers are stuck, unable to sell without concessions, yet unable to buy without stretching further. The chain is breaking in both directions. Denver's challenge is not demand collapse, it's demand exhaustion. People still want to live here, but fewer can justify the numbers, and those who arrive now negotiate harder, wait longer, and walk away faster than buyers did just 2 years ago. At the same time, visible stress is rising. Traffic congestion has worsened. Infrastructure strains are more apparent. And urban issues, homelessness, public safety concerns, and rising service costs are changing how buyers evaluate neighborhoods. Denver is not in free fall, but it is no longer insulated by momentum. And that raises a difficult question. When lifestyle cities become financially exclusive, how long can demand alone keep their housing markets afloat? 4. Charlotte, North Carolina. Charlotte's rise has been steady, strategic, and powerful. As one of the nation's largest banking centers, the city positioned itself as a place where serious careers met manageable living costs. Finance, corporate headquarters, and logistics anchored the economy. New residents arrived by the thousands, and housing followed the money. For a time, it worked cleanly, but by 2026, the cracks are becoming harder to ignore. Charlotte expanded fast, both outward and upward. New subdivisions spread across the metro. Mixed-use developments reshaped entire neighborhoods. Builders assumed demand would remain constant. Instead, buyer behavior changed. As interest rates rose, affordability thinned. Buyers who once qualified comfortably now hesitate or fail to qualify at all. Listings that would have triggered bidding wars 2 years ago now require price adjustments, seller credits, or both. Days on market are stretching, especially in newer developments where competition is intense. The deeper issue is imbalance. Charlotte's growth narrative attracted investors and second home buyers who expected easy exits. But as inventory builds and demand slows, those exits are narrowing. Rental strategies aren't rescuing the math either. Rents have softened in several quarters, while property taxes and insurance costs continue to climb. For homeowners, the pressure is subtle but real. Selling means negotiating. Waiting means carrying higher monthly costs. And staying put means absorbing rising expenses without the upside of appreciation. Infrastructure strain is adding friction. Traffic congestion is worsening. Commutes are lengthening. And rapid development has sparked concerns about gentrification and neighborhood stability, factors buyers now weigh more carefully than before. Charlotte isn't losing people, but it is losing pricing power. And that shift matters, because when a city built on growth begins to slow, even slightly, the housing market doesn't crash loudly. It tightens quietly. So the question becomes, in a city that grew on confidence, what happens when confidence alone can no longer move homes? 5. Raleigh, North Carolina. Raleigh has long been described as the safe bet. Not speculative, not flashy. A city anchored by education, research, and long-term employment stability. For years, that reputation insulated its housing market from volatility. Families moved in for schools. Professionals followed jobs tied to universities, healthcare, and technology. Demand felt structural, not emotional. But by 2026, even Raleigh is feeling pressure. The research triangle continues to generate employment, yet housing supply has expanded faster than household formation. New subdivisions, townhomes, and apartment complexes approved during the boom years are now coming online into a slower market. Buyers haven't disappeared, but they've become selective. Homes are taking longer to sell. Price growth has stalled. And sellers who assumed steady appreciation are adjusting expectations for the first time in years. The challenge isn't collapse, it's compression. Monthly costs have risen sharply. Property taxes have adjusted upward. Insurance premiums are higher than they were just a few years ago. Childcare, utilities, and transportation now consume a larger share of household income. Even with solid jobs, many families are finding that the margin for error has vanished. Suburbs once seen as automatic upgrades are now part of the problem. Commutes are longer. Infrastructure hasn't kept pace. And buyers are weighing total lifestyle costs, not just home prices, before committing. Raleigh's market is still supported by fundamentals, but fundamentals don't eliminate risk. They simply slow the descent. Sellers are discovering that patience is no longer optional. Buyers know they can wait. And the balance of power, once firmly in the seller's hands, is now drifting toward neutrality. That shift is subtle, but it matters. Because when a stable market begins to stall, the warning signs are easy to dismiss until they're not. Which raises the next question. If even conservative growth markets are tightening, what happens in cities built on speed instead of stability? 6. Fort Worth, Texas. For much of the past decade, Fort Worth benefited from a simple comparison. Cheaper than Dallas, less congested, still close enough to tap into one of the largest job markets in the country. That positioning fueled steady demand. Families moved outward, builders followed. And Texas's lack of state income tax reinforced the belief that affordability here was durable. By 2026, that assumption is being tested. Fort Worth added large volumes of new housing during the boom years, particularly on the suburban fringe. Single-family developments, build-to-rent communities, and speculative new construction all arrived based on the same premise. Population growth would absorb everything. Now, absorption is slowing. Listings are sitting longer, especially in newer neighborhoods where similar homes compete directly with one another. Builders are quietly offering incentives. Resale sellers are adjusting prices to stay relevant. And buyers, no longer rushed, are negotiating aggressively. The pressure point isn't price alone, it's carrying cost. Texas's property tax structure means homeowners pay more as assessments rise, even when market values stall. Insurance premiums have increased alongside replacement costs and weather-related risk. HOA fees are climbing as sprawling communities struggle with maintenance and infrastructure expenses. For households that stretch to buy during peak demand, the math is tightening. Selling now often means giving up equity. Holding means absorbing higher fixed costs without appreciation to offset them. Rental strategies offer limited relief. Increased supply has capped rent growth, and in some areas, rents are softening. Cash flow margins are thinning just as expenses rise. Fort Worth isn't collapsing, but it is cooling unevenly. And in markets built on outward expansion, that matters. Because when growth slows on the edge, it doesn't stay there. It works its way inward. So the question becomes, how resilient is affordability when the tax and insurance structure never really adjusts downward? 7. Boise, Idaho. Boise became one of the most dramatic symbols of the pandemic housing surge. A smaller city suddenly thrust onto the national stage. Clean air, low crime, outdoor access, and prices that for a moment still felt reachable. That moment passed quickly. As remote work expanded, Boise absorbed an influx of out-of-state buyers willing to pay far more than locals ever could. Prices surged. New subdivisions appeared almost overnight. Investors followed, convinced the migration wave would last. By 2026, that wave has receded. Buyer traffic has slowed, listings linger, and homes purchased near the peak are now competing against both resale inventory and newly built properties that must move. Price reductions are spreading, particularly in newer developments where similar homes line the same streets. The core issue is reversal. Boise's growth was never fueled by massive job expansion. It was fueled by movement. When that movement slowed, demand weakened, but supply kept arriving. Builders who planned for continuation are now adjusting to contraction. For homeowners, the consequences are sharp. Many bought with thin margins, expecting appreciation to carry them forward. Now they face higher interest costs, rising insurance premiums, and property taxes that don't fall simply because prices do. Renting isn't always an escape. In several areas, rent growth has stalled, yet a tightening cash flow for owners who hope to wait out the market. Infrastructure strain adds another layer. Traffic congestion has increased. Schools are more crowded. Public services are stretched thinner than they were just a few years ago. What once felt like a manageable small city now feels constrained. Boise isn't emptying out, but it is repricing reality. And that repricing is painful in markets that rose fastest. Because when demand is built on momentum instead of depth, it doesn't need to collapse to cause damage. It only needs to stop. Which brings us to the final question. If migration-driven markets are unwinding first, where does the pressure go next? Across these 7 cities, the pattern is no longer subtle. This isn't just about prices moving up or down. It's about a system that was built on assumptions that no longer hold. For years, households, investors, and builders operated under the same belief. Demand would always arrive in time. Migration would continue. Financing would remain manageable. And if something went wrong, appreciation would cover the mistake. That belief is now colliding with reality. In each of these markets, the trigger looks different. Insurance in Florida, overbuilding in Texas, affordability walls in Colorado, migration reversals in Idaho. But the outcome is the same. The cost of ownership has become disconnected from household income. When that happens, the balance of power shifts. Buyers slow down, sellers lose leverage, listings accumulate, and homeowners who once felt wealthy on paper discover that equity doesn't pay monthly bills. Some hold on, and absorbing higher costs and hoping for stabilization. Others exit early, locking in losses to avoid deeper risk. This doesn't mean every market is headed for collapse, but it does mean the era of effortless housing gains is over. The next phase will be quieter and more painful. Price discovery will take time. Confidence will erode gradually, and the damage will be felt not in headlines but in household budgets. So the real question isn't whether this is a correction or a crash. It's whether the market has fully adjusted to a world where money is expensive, risk is visible, and growth is no longer guaranteed. If you live in one of these cities, or are thinking about buying or selling, pay attention. These aren't abstract trends. They're lived experiences. If you've seen this pressure firsthand, share your story in the comments. And if you want to keep following where the U.S. housing market is tightening next, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Because the shift is already underway, and the cost of ignoring it may be higher than you expect.